Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. I'm Jeff Rumburg, managing partner of MetricNet, and I will be your host for today's webcast on 2024's Contact Center Benchmarking Roundup. I want to welcome all of you and thank you for participating in our webcast today. And I want to thank Bright Talk for inviting MetricNet to speak on this topic. Before we get started, I have just a few administrative announcements to make. During our webcast, you will be in listen-only mode. But if you have any questions during the webcast, you'll notice a questions button on my screen, just below the image of my slides. And during the webcast, you can click that button and type in your questions as the webcast progresses. I'll wrap up my presentation a few minutes early to answer any questions that you've typed in during the webcast. Now, just by way of quick introduction, MetricNet's core business is metrics, benchmarking, sourcing initiatives, meaning outsourcing, and AI transformations. We conduct contact center, service desk, desktop support, and field services benchmarks and outsourcing initiatives in virtually every industry. We now have the largest database of contact center benchmarking data in the industry. Additionally, we've negotiated some of the largest contact center outsourcing deals in the industry and continue to work with both managed service providers and their clients to develop contracts that are mutually beneficial to both parties. Now, many of you I know, but I don't know all of you, so let me just give you a thumbnail sketch of my bio. I'm now in my fourth decade in this industry. I've worked in IT service and support and contact centers for more than 3 decades. During that time, I've been fortunate enough to be named one of the top 25 thought leaders by HDI and ICMI, received the Ron Munn's Lifetime Achievement Award. I've spoken at 25 consecutive ICMI and HDI conferences. I wrote a benchmarking book. I've worked with more than half the Global 1000 on various benchmarks, published more than 100 white papers on contact center best practices, metrics, and benchmarks. And as I mentioned, more than half the Global 2000 are clients of ours. And I've worked in every vertical market, including state, local, and federal government, as well as nonprofit organizations. So that's a little bit of my background. Now, if you're interested, you can download today's presentation and some associated attachments just by clicking on the attachments button. And we do have 2 polls in our webcast today, and we'd invite you to vote on those polls when they come up. The first one is just a demographics poll about what type of contact center you're affiliated with. The second one allows you to schedule a free consultation call with MetricNet. And then, of course, at the conclusion of our webcast today, we would ask you to tell us your thoughts, give us your feedback, and we will do our best to incorporate any improvements that you recommend into future webcasts. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. What we're presenting today is a lot of empirical data. Most of it is from 2024. We do, however, towards the end of the webcast, talk about mega trends in the industry, which go beyond just 2024. It looks back many years and looks at what's changing in channel mix and cost and agent metrics and quality metrics and so on. But it's important to point out that what we're talking about today is very empirical in nature. It's based on the more than 4,000 contact center benchmarks that MetricNet has completed over many years. It's drawn from our global benchmarking database. We track more than 70 metrics, everything from cost per contact and first contact resolution rate to customer satisfaction and average speed of answer. We've also identified and created a taxonomy of nearly 120 industry best practices that address everything from contact center strategy to leadership to human resource management practices to contact handling, channel mix, technology, the discipline of performance measurement and management, and then what we call stakeholder communication, which is more than just customer communication. It's making sure that for your parent companies, you're communicating an effective value proposition so that you are viewed as a value center, not merely a cost center. So everything you see in here today is based on empirical observation. There's nothing academic or theoretical about what I'm going to be presenting. Now, the data comes from nearly 20 countries. You can see where those are located. Now, I would say that 2/3 of the data is from North America and Western Europe, what we would call the very call center intensive countries, a lot of contact centers in North America, specifically Canada and the United States, a lot of contact centers in Western Europe. But nevertheless, we do have data in here from contact centers in other countries. Now, the ones that you see, for example, in South America, Latin America, Eastern Europe, Southeast Asia, a lot of those are outsourced, outsourcers, I should say. So you know who the big names are. I'm not going to mention any of them, but they tend to set up shop in the lower cost countries, whether it's Philippines, India, Vietnam, parts of Latin America. The reason is that contact centers are labor intensive, and if you can reduce the cost of personnel, the cost of agents, supervisors, team leads, workforce schedulers, and the like, you can reduce the overall cost, the total cost of ownership for that contact center pretty substantially. So in the countries like North America and Western Europe, where the costs tend to be higher, those are generally enterprise-run contact centers, meaning large organizations, big banks in North America, big consumer products companies in Europe, and so on. Many of them run their own contact centers. Oftentimes when you see contact centers in the lower cost parts of the world, particularly India and the Philippines, those are contact centers that are run by MSPs, managed service providers, that are taking advantage of the lower labor costs in those countries. Now, the data comes from a lot of different types of contact centers. They're all inbound customer service, but they come from the banking sector, healthcare, telecom, insurance, and hospitality. It's important to note, however, that the best practices don't vary by vertical market. You know, we often get calls from prospective clients in one industry who tell us, oh, we want to be benchmarked against other gas and electric utilities, or we want to be benchmarked against other banks or other financial services companies. And that's fine, but you don't necessarily have to do that, because the best practices are pretty common from one vertical market to another. There may be some things that are unique. For example, in some markets, if you're doing, emergency services like a 911 contact center, you probably don't want to benchmark your contact center against a banking contact center. But those instances are relatively rare. Most of the time, the best practices are pretty common from one contact center to another. So it's important to point that out and not fall into the trap of thinking that just because you work in financial services or insurance or banking or consumer product support, that you need to benchmark against other contact centers in that vertical market. What's more important, and I'll get to this in a few slides, is that you have commonality in the services you offer. So we call it scope, scale, complexity, and geography. If you get commonality on those 4 dimensions, you have a valid comparison group. And I'll, again, elaborate on that before we get into the data. Now, our first poll, and I mentioned there were 2 in this webcast. The first poll is just demographics. We kind of want to know where you're coming from. Are you involved with a sales contact center, a service contact center? Might be a tech support contact center, otherwise known as a service desk. Might be something else. Maybe it's collections, or maybe you're not affiliated with a contact center. But we'd be interested in knowing what your contact center affiliation is. So if you would vote on this, that would be great. And that will give us some insight into what the audience breakdown looks like as far as vertical market goes. Before we jump into the benchmarking data for 2024, let's talk about the benchmarking approach. Most of you are familiar with this. In fact, I know that some of you have done benchmarking with MetricNet, so you've probably even seen this slide before. But what you want to do is compare your contact center to a valid group of other contact centers, a valid peer group. So comparing your cost per contact, your customer satisfaction, your cost per minute of handle time, your agent job satisfaction, your annual agent turnover, your first contact resolution rate, your net promoter score, if you track that, your call abandonment rate, your speed of answer in the voice channel, your speed of response in the chat channel, and your channel mix. How much are you deflecting, for example, into voice bots and chat bots, which is a huge trend right now. So you compare your performance to a valid peer group. You look for gaps, meaning where you're performing below the peer group average, and you diagnose why your performance is below the peer group average. And once you diagnose why your performance is lagging, you can do something about it. You can either mitigate or eliminate those negative performance gaps. Now, the real power of benchmarking is that in this industry, most improvements take place incrementally through trial and error. And that's why so few support organizations, so few contact centers become world-class. Only about 5% of them are what we would consider to be world-class. The reason is they're either not improving at all or they're improving too slowly to catch up with what it means to be world-class. But what benchmarking says is that we understand what it means to be a great contact center. We know what the metrics look like. We know what the practices look like. So instead of improving incrementally through trial and error and reinventing the wheel, let's leapfrog ahead of all of that and let's go right to the best practices and adopt those and mature those quickly. So you get on a steep path of continuous improvement so that you achieve world-class performance, not in months, years, or never, but rather in days or weeks. And that is possible if you just leverage the industry's best demonstrated practices. So that's the real power of benchmarking, is that you can achieve world-class performance very quickly. Now, when we talk to our clients about why they undertake benchmarking, these are among the most common reasons. And most of them are pretty common sense. You know, we want to know what our baseline is, an objective performance baseline. What do we look like objectively compared to the industry? We want to look for ways to improve. We want to cut our costs. We want to improve our quality. We want to adopt best practices. Go down the list all the way to the lower right-hand corner, achieving world-class performance. That's the ultimate objective of most benchmarking initiatives. And we do have a definition of that I will share with you. But these are among the most common motivators for benchmarking. They're the reasons why, or the most common reasons we hear for why a contact center wants to undertake benchmarking. But they can roughly be grouped in three categories, meaning we want to, if you take all those motivators for benchmarking, they can roughly be organized into, we want to get better, meaning higher quality. We want to get faster, meaning quicker response and resolution times. And we want to contain our costs. Cheaper is kind of a pejorative, but what it suggests is that you can do the same thing at a lower cost. So better, faster, cheaper is not just a cliche. It refers to the three dimensions of competition: quality, speed, and cost. That's how organizations compete, on one or more of those dimensions. And benchmarking is designed to help you improve performance in all three dimensions at the same time. For any contact center that is not yet world-class, you can move the needle on all three dimensions at the same time. You can improve quality and deliver faster service and reduce your costs at the same time. So it's a false choice to suggest that you either have to go for lower cost or higher quality. Generally, you can get both. Now, many contact centers have a bias towards one or the other. They have a bias towards being lower cost, or they have a bias towards being higher quality. That's fine. That's very normal. But don't fall into the trap of assuming that this is a binary choice. We either have to be high quality or we have to be low cost. That's a false choice. You can actually be very high quality at a reasonable cost. You can also be very low cost at a reasonable quality. So yes, there's a trade-off between those two, but it doesn't mean you have to sacrifice completely one for the other. You don't have to sacrifice cost for quality, and you don't have to sacrifice quality for cost. What we've discovered, and we've known this now for about 10 years, is that contact centers that become world-class, and I'm going to define that for you. Let me define that for you first, and then I'm going to talk about this one-to-one correspondence between world-class performance and contact centers that do benchmarking. There's four elements of a world-class contact center. One is that your quality is high, top quartile on customer satisfaction and or net promoter score. Second is that you contain your costs well. You're in the bottom quartile on your cost per contact or cost per minute of handle time. you're following industry best practices, and they have been well defined and documented, and they are mature. And then your ROI is above 100%, meaning you're adding value on each transaction. Now, some people wonder, how is it that you create an ROI above 100% if you're doing customer service? Well, we're the only organization that I'm aware of in the industry that has documented this extensively through white papers and presentations and whatnot. We've done webcasts on this, but the idea is that even if you're delivering customer service, pick any industry, it doesn't matter, you're delivering customer service, you can create economic value by driving customer loyalty, by driving repeat business, by increasing your product count per customer, and by creating positive word of mouth referrals, so you can gain market share over time by virtue of the quality of service you offer in your contact center. So yes, even if you're doing customer support, doesn't matter, in a bank or for a credit card company or for an insurance company or hospitality, you can drive economic value through, as I mentioned, repeat business, loyalty, average sale size, lifetime customer value, and other things. And we can measure those things. And so we can attach an ROI to any given contact center. But this is what it means to be world-class. So you hear that term thrown around a lot. We're a world-class contact center. Well, how do you define that? We're the only ones that have defined it. And it's these 4 criteria that define a world-class contact center. Moreover, what we've discovered is that there's a one-to-one correspondence between contact centers that benchmark annually and those that achieve world-class performance. So it doesn't matter if the benchmark drives world-class performance or if the world-class performance is what drives you to benchmarking. The fact is, they are very closely related. They're very closely correlated, and it is a cause and effect relationship. Benchmarking gets you to world-class performance quicker than any other continuous improvement tool. So we all know there are many continuous improvement methodologies out there. There's Six Sigma, there's PDCA, Plan, Do, Check, Act. There's Pareto analysis. The list goes on and on. But benchmarking is the single most effective tool to get you to world-class performance and get you there quickly. Now, a word before I start to share the data with you, and I mentioned earlier that I would talk about what it means to have a valid benchmarking peer group. A valid benchmarking peer group, or let me back up and say that what passes for benchmarking in the contact center industry a lot of times is just a comparison of data from a bunch of disparate contact centers that have nothing to do with each other. They have nothing in common. So you have contact centers in there that are doing tech support. You might have contact centers in there doing collections. You might have contact centers in there that are doing customer service. In a banking, in the banking sector, you might have contact centers in there that are providing emergency services. And the idea is that you put a bunch of data together and you say, here's the average cost per contact, the average CSAT, the average speed of answer, the average abandonment rate, and so on. But the contact centers have nothing to do with each other. They're not even loosely connected. They have different scopes, meaning they offer different services. They have different scales, meaning, everything from 1,000 contacts a month to several million contacts per month. Their complexity is quite different, ranges from 2 minutes per contact to 30 or 40 minutes per contact. And their geography is all over the place. Geography matters because wage rates are affected by geography, which is why outsourcers tend to go to the Philippines and India and Eastern Europe and Latin America, is because the wage rates are lower there. And you can deliver a quality service from those locations at a much lower cost. So that's value proposition used by many of the managed service providers. But my point is that a valid benchmarking comparison is not just a bunch of data from disparate contact centers that are in different industries and so on. You have to be able to normalize, and we're the only organization in the industry that has enough benchmarking data to be able to give you a valid peer group, typically 20 or more contact centers in your benchmarking peer group, and that have commonality in the scope of services, meaning the services offered, the scale, meaning the volume, monthly volume of contacts handled, the complexity. You can think of average handle time as being a pretty good proxy for the complexity of a contact center. And then geography, for the reason I mentioned. Wage rates are really different in the Philippines than they are in Singapore. They're very different in the United States than they are in Hungary, for example. And so that matters because 70% of your cost in a contact center is related to labor. That would be your agents, your supervisors, team leads, workforce schedulers, QA/QC professionals, and so on. So in order to get a valid comparison, you need to normalize on these factors. And these so-called benchmarks where I won't name the industry analyst firms, but they just throw a bunch of data together that has no regard whatsoever for geography, complexity, scale, or scope. And those are not valid comparisons. So a valid benchmarking comparison is going to take this into account. And I make this point here because I'm about to show you our 2024 benchmarking data where we do have representation. This is North American data, but it has representation from a lot of different industries. So I want to caution you to be really careful about drawing conclusions about your own performance data relative to this data. So for example, if you look about a third of the way down to the page, you see the average cost per voice contact is $7.94. Well, if you were to measure that in your contact center and you find that your cost per contact is $15, it doesn't necessarily mean you're high cost. It means you're above this average. But if you have not made this normalization for scope and scale, complexity, and geography, you can't really draw any conclusions by the fact that your cost per contact is higher than this average. Conversely, if your cost per contact is $5, be careful about patting yourself on the back and saying, we're a very low-cost contact center, because again, the normalization has not been made here on scope and scale, complexity, and geography. So these represent industry data across North America in 2024. First set of data is channel mix. Next set of metrics, this is our metrics taxonomy. We have cost metrics, we have handle time metrics, we have voice quality metrics, we have metrics related to voice productivity, voice SLA, and agent metrics. Now, there are multiple channels. If you look at the number of channels we've got, we're showing 7 different channels here. We've got voice, voice bot, chat bot, IVR, web ticket, and then other, which could be walk-up, it might be fax in. But we've got 7 channels, 7 channels shown here. And one of the key mega trends, which I'll talk about in a little bit, has to do with how the channel mix is changing, particularly getting away from the labor-heavy channels of voice and chat and deflecting into the AI channels of voice bot and chat bot. That's an industry mega trend, far bigger than any other mega trend that's going on, far bigger than any other trend that's going on in the contact center space. But what we're showing here are metrics in the second column from the left. That's on pages 16 and 17. And then we're showing statistics for the benchmarks that we did in 2024. We're showing the arithmetic average. The minimum means a low value, doesn't mean good or bad, but it's a low value. The median, which is the middle point on the data, and then the maximum, which is a high value. Again, doesn't mean good or bad, it just means the highest value in the benchmark of all the benchmarks we've done in 2024. So this is a tabular representation of the data. There's a lot there. We could spend the rest of our webcast talking about that. But since you can download the presentation, I'll let you peruse this data at your leisure and at your convenience. I do want to point out that we present data as well in quartiles. Quartile just means 1/4. So if I stack rank customer satisfaction in the voice channel from best to worst, and then organize it into 1 quarters, 1 quarters, top quarter, second quarter, third and fourth quarter, meaning the bottom quartile. This is what it looks like. The best CSAT in our benchmarks this year was 98.1%. The worst CSAT was 54.2%. The median was 85.9%. Median is different than the average. They're usually close, but they are different statistics. The arithmetic average is different than the median. The median is the middle data point. The arithmetic average typically greater than the median because there's a long right-hand tail on a lot of these. So the average tends to get extended beyond the median. You can see what the FCR is, 98.3%, the best, 66.9%, the worst, the median is 78.7%. We're also showing call quality and then productivity metrics, which drive your costs. We've got the agent utilization, number of contacts handled per agent per month, and then agents divided by the total contact center headcount. So those are what we consider to be productivity metrics. Then we go on to the channel mix, and this is fairly important because one of the mega trend that's going on right now is a reallocation of incoming contacts into different channels, particularly going to voice and chat bots. So you see that the way we think about this is that you want to minimize the voice handled contacts because they're very labor intensive and very costly. And we recognize the need for the voice channel, but if you can go to a voice bot or a chat bot, that's preferable. And so a low number on voice percent of total is good. That's why it's top quartile. Voice bot is just the opposite. We want to see more volume go into voice bots. That's why high number is the top quartile. 42.7% was the highest number we saw going into voice bots, and top quartile would be 21.7%. You can see in that top quartile box there. Chat is again it's a live agent channel. It's very labor intensive. It's very costly. So we like to see a lower number for chat in the top quartile. Chat bot, by contrast, we want to see more volume go into the chat bots. So 37% was the best in 2024. 8.8% was the top quartile. IVR, same thing. It's agentless. You want to resolve as much as you can in the IVR. Highest number we saw was with a commercial bank at 71.6% of inbound contacts resolved in the IVR. Top quartile was 36.8%. Then on web and email submit, the top quartile is 2.2%. That's also a labor intensive channel. So you want to see a lower number there rather than a higher number. And then the other, usually, sometimes there's some walk-in volume, sometimes there's some fax-in volume, sometimes people mail letters in through the U.S. Postal Service, and that's what that other channel is. But it's important to note that these are not always arrayed top quartile to bottom quartile, highest to lowest, or lowest to highest. What we're showing is that the labor-intensive channels of voice, chat, and web and email tickets, a lower number is better. That's why you see the lower number in the top quartile. By contrast, the agentless channels of voice bot, chat bot, and IVR, the higher numbers are in the top quartile. So we're trying to communicate here that you want to minimize volume in the labor-intensive channels and maximize volume in the agentless channels, assuming that customers are not forced down those agentless channels. You want to always give the customer choice, but when they do choose an agentless channel, deliver a high quality experience there. By contrast, when they choose an agent assist channel like voice, chat, or web ticket email, you want to deliver the best possible experience that you can there. Here are some agent quartiles. We look at turnover, absenteeism, schedule adherence, occupancy, training hours, and tenure, meaning average months of experience. And then we have job satisfaction, which is a critically important metric because the higher the job satisfaction is, the lower the turnover will be, and the lower the absenteeism will be. And job satisfaction is a rough proxy for morale within the contact center. And so the higher the morale is, the better, not just the lower turnover and the lower absenteeism, but you also get better outcomes. You get better first contact resolution rate. And because of that, you also get better customer satisfaction. So job satisfaction is a bellwether metric that drives just about every other metric in the contact center. You want to take steps, and I'll show you that when we get to the industry megatrends, take steps to ensure high levels of job satisfaction through training, coaching, and career pathing. So that's a real quick snapshot of the data. Let's now look at some of the more subjective observations, meaning not necessarily quantifiable, although some of them are. In addition to the data that I just showed you, I think it's important to have kind of a 30,000 foot view, a macro perspective of what's happening in this industry. A big one, and I've already alluded to this, is that the channel mix is changing. It's moving away from agent assist channels to automated channels, in particular voice and chat bots. Compensation is actually going up for live agents with the recognition that the higher quality the agent is, the better results you get. You get better first contact resolution rate and hence better customer satisfaction. You get overall better performance when you increase compensation because that gives you access to a more qualified labor pool, meaning higher compensation allows you to hire a more qualified, more experienced, better educated agent. Most of the contact centers we work with now have a scorecard, and I'll show you an example of that. Turnover reduction and agent accountability are both increasing. Agent accountability agents now typically have their own scorecards. Turnover reduction, what can we do to minimize turnover? Because turnover does drive absenteeism, and also is a proxy for agent job satisfaction. So if turnover is high, typically it's because the agent job satisfaction is not very good. And then the megatrend of all megatrends is that AI and zero touch. The goal of AI is zero touch. It's to get to the point where every transaction is handled agentless, meaning that there's no agent assistance. Now, that's an aspirational goal. No one's ever going to get to zero agent touch. However, it's okay, just like in total quality and zero defects. No one ever got to total quality. No one ever got to zero defects, but it was still an aspirational goal. And the goal of AI, in part, is to get to zero touch, where every contact is handled without the benefit of an agent. In other words, no 100% agentless resolution. That is by far the dominant industry megatrend. And I'm going to comment on each one of these. But let's first start with kind of a 15-year view of what's happened in this industry. If we look at cost and we divide it by handle time, we get a cost per minute of handle time. That's one way we normalize the cost metric. Because if we just look at cost per contact, well, it's going to vary quite a bit. If you're a credit card company and people are calling up to check on their balances and seek a credit increase, things like that, what are my last 5 transactions? Those are quick handle times. Those are 5-6 minutes. By contrast, if somebody's calling up, it's day after, Christmas, and they've got a new smart TV and they're getting it set up, and they need some help getting it set up, because for some reason they're not getting the internet to connect to the television. They might be on the phone with support from that, whether it's Sony or LG or any of the other big television manufacturers. They might be on the phone for 20 or 30 minutes. The handle time might look very different. And hence the cost per contact would be very different. In the first case, quick transaction credit card might be a $3 contact. In the latter case, where you're talking to the consumer electronics company, your 20 or 30 minute handle time call might be a $20 call. So we normalize that by dividing it by handle time to show you what the cost per minute of handle time is. And it has gone down from 2011 to 2024, largely because of improved schedule adherence and more effective workforce scheduling. So getting better utilization, or just getting better workforce scheduling and better training is reducing the cost per minute of handle time. So we have a green arrow there. Utilization is about the same as it was, 15 years ago. CSAT has gone up because first contact resolution has gone up, or actually FCR stayed about the same. The reason FCR has not gone up is because the complexity of the contacts has become has increased. So if you're taking something real simple like a balance check in a bank, in a checking or savings account, that's of course close to 100% FCR. However, a lot of the easy stuff's getting automated away. The password resets, the balance check, the request for credit increase, and so on. Even things like on a credit card, challenging a charge or disputing a charge. Those have been automated away, most of them. And so what's left over is fairly complex, or more complex than the historical mix of contacts. And so the FCR has actually gone down. So there's an explanation for why that FCR has decreased. It's because the complexity of the contacts handled by the agents has increased so much over the last 15 years. All the easy stuff has already been automated away, and what's left over is more complex. And so the FCR is not quite as high as it was 15 years ago. And then job satisfaction, because we understand that job satisfaction is not just an accident, it's a concerted effort at providing quality training, coaching, and career pathing. That's improved quite a bit. It's improved by almost 10 percentage points, and that's a really good thing. And so we see overall a positive trend over the last 15 years in some of the key metrics. The one metric that hasn't improved is FCR, and that's for the reason I mentioned, which is that the contacts are becoming more complex. The agent-assisted contacts are becoming more complex. Now, one of the things that's driving one of the big drivers of the adoption of AI and voice bots and chatbots has to do with channel mix. So if we look at the voice inbound contacts for different channel types, voice has decreased steadily since 2007. The blue line here represents voice. You can see it was almost 80% back in 07. Now it's less than 30%. If we look at the next one is chat, and I'm not, you'll see towards the end that the actual colors will show up next to the channels, but for now you can just go down the list. The blue is voice, the gray is chat, then we have a web submitted, which is blue, and then we have email, which is a dying channel, and that's a good thing because email it's a harder channel than a web submit, because with web submit, you can usually fill out a form and it's formatted data. With just an email, oftentimes it's not very, very well formatted. So that channel is kind of dying off. And then we have walk-up, we have self-service, we have SMS. The voice bot, you can see that coming on strong. Let me just click that again. So watch, oops, okay. Watch when I get to voice bots. It's gonna happen right now. Okay, voice bot increased dramatically over the last 3 years. And then chatbot, you can see that down there. The voice and chatbots have grown most over the last 2 or 3 years for obvious reasons. Now there's two trends here. One is economic, meaning that as you deflect into lower cost channels, you reduce your average cost per contact. And the other is demographic. If you look at newer consumers or newer customers moving into the workforce or becoming of age, meaning that they've got their credit cards, they spend their own money and so on, they prefer, voice bots and chat bots and self-service versus, chatting or doing a voice contact. So the economics is shown here with the yellow chart. So far, up until this point, what we're showing is just channel mix. Let me show you those. Okay, just channel mix so far. When I click on my mouse, you're going to see a yellow line come up, which represents the cost per contact. And on the right-hand side, you're going to see the units for cost per contact. So you see the spike there for COVID in 2021. And then the yellow line has steadily been decreasing because these alternate channels, especially voice and chat bots, are much lower costs than a chat, a live voice, or a live chat. And so channel mix has a lot to do with what's happening in this industry right now as organizations are scrambling to drive as much volume as they can into voice bots and chat bots, which averages down the cost per contact over time. Now, if you want to know what the top quartiles look like on channel mix, you want as few live voice contacts and as few live chats as possible. So top quartile there, meaning low, would be 25% of your volume in live voice and 8.3% of your volume in live chat. By contrast, you want your voice bots and chat bots to be as high as possible, and the top quartile there is 21.7% voice bot and 8.8% chat bot. IVR and self-service, we realize depending on the contact center you're operating, you might not be able to drive volume into the IVR and resolve customers' issues inside the IVR, but if you are, the top quartile is 36.8%. And then web and email, you want that number as low as possible because it's also an agent channel, meaning a labor-intensive channel. 2.2% is top quartile there. So top quartile on live voice, voice bot, and I'm sorry, let me back up. Top quartile on live voice, live chat, and web and email is going to be the lowest value because you want to minimize agent assist contacts if you're trying to average down your cost per contact. The top quartile for voice bot, chat bot, and IVR self-help is going to be the high value. You want as much volume into the voice bot and chat bot and IVR self-service as you possibly can because those are your agentless channels and they drive down your average cost per contact, assuming that you're not sacrificing your quality. The customer doesn't feel forced to pick a particular channel. They don't feel like they're forced to deal with a voice bot or a chat bot. So as long as you're giving the customer choice and you can drive volume into the agentless channels of voice bots, chat bots, and IVR, and out of the labor-intensive channels of voice, live chat, and email web, that's what you're trying to do here. That's what zero touch is. This is how you get to kind of the holy grail of everything agentless. And again, that's an aspirational goal. Nobody will get there 100%, but we can still hold it out as a target and a goal. I mentioned that compensation is going up, and the reason is that there's now widespread recognition proven by empirical benchmarking data that if you go out and hire the lowest cost or lowest salary agents that you can, you don't get great performance out of them because generally they don't have a lot of experience. They may not be as well educated, and the overall cost per contact and the total cost of ownership for a contact center will be higher when you hire the least or the lowest compensated agents. The reason is they're just not qualified to do the job. So you get worse results. Your FCR is lower, your CSAT is lower, your response rates are slower. By contrast, if you're willing to pay up, and these numbers are just an example, so it might be typical. Let's see, $45K per year would probably be optimal in most of North America, as long as you're not in a major metro area like New York City, San Francisco Bay Area, Los Angeles, Seattle, Portland. Some of the higher cost regions of the country, if you get out of those higher cost regions, your optimal starting compensation is going to be somewhere around $45K per year. And that actually reduces your total cost of ownership because you get so much better performance out of those agents. You get a much higher FCR, much higher CSAT, and you're not having to escalate or transfer tickets to another or transfer contacts to another source of support. So compensation is increasing, not because contact centers are so benevolent and because they like, being altruistic towards their agents. It's increasing because it's now well understood that by increasing the compensation, you get a better quality agent and you get better performance. Now, that isn't true forever. At some point, the curve does start to turn back up. It's kind of a U-shaped curve or a lopsided U-shape, if you will. But the idea is that compensation is increasing because contact centers now recognize that the easy stuff is being automated away. And so we need more qualified agents, and they also produce better results for us. So we're willing to pay a little bit more to get a higher quality agent. The contact center scorecard, many of you who've been on my webcast before know that we talk about this on almost every webcast. The idea here is that you aggregate your KPIs, the key performance indicators. You'll have a cost metric in here, a quality metric like CSAT. You'll have a productivity metric like utilization. You'll have a first contact resolution rate metric, an agent metric like job satisfaction, and then a service level metric. And you aggregate these together and normalize them to create a single overall measure of performance that can then be used to compare against other contact centers that operate in your environment, meaning scope, scale, complexity, and geography has been normalized. So you can look at your balance score compared to others in your benchmarking peer group. On this particular chart, the red dashed line is the average. It's a little over 55%. Let's see, 56.1%. The high score is 81.9%. Low score is 37.5%. Nobody ever gets 100% on these because you can't get the best score on every single metric. You can be top quartile on every metric, but you're never going to get the best score on every single metric, which you would have to get in order to get a score of 100% on your balanced scorecard. So many organizations, or I should say most contact centers now have a scorecard, which measures their overall performance relative to other peer contact centers. And it gives you a way of tracking your aggregate performance over time, which is what I'm showing here on page 28. The blue bars represent the monthly performance and the green background represents the trailing 12-month average. And if you're getting a general upward trend, you never go straight up or straight down. But if you're generally getting an upward trend, it means that in the aggregate, your performance is improving, not just on cost, not just on quality, not just on your agent metrics, your service level metrics, but in the aggregate, when we put those together, we balance them out, and you're improving in the aggregate. This is what you want in your contact center. Turnover reduction strategies recognize the fact that job satisfaction is a function of, I got ahead of myself there. Job satisfaction is a function of training, coaching, career pathing, and compensation. So if you're delivering high quality and adequate coaching and training to your agents, if they have a bona fide documented career path and they are compensated effectively, keep in mind that U-shaped compensation chart I showed you a few slides back. This is what drives turnover. And if you are delivering adequate coaching and training, and the agent has a career path and they are compensated effectively, you're going to get great agent satisfaction, which in turn drives good customer satisfaction, which in turn drives good FCR, which in turn reduces absenteeism and turnover. So there are multiple benefits of paying attention to actively managing job satisfaction through these 4 levers of compensation, coaching, training, and career pathing. And most contact centers now recognize this. And so they are actively engaged in pulling these levers to achieve the best possible job satisfaction they can, because that does translate into better CSAT and lower costs through lower absenteeism and lower turnover. So there's a secondary knock-on effect that happens when job satisfaction is managed effectively. Agents also have scorecards. I showed you several slides back what the overall contact center scorecard looks like. Well, much like your contact center performance can be measured and managed using a scorecard, you can measure and manage individual agents by giving them scorecards and tracking their CSAT and their FCR and the number of contacts they handle. And in fact, those are the 3 most important. So CSAT tells you the quality of the contacts they're handling if you're tracking CSAT by agent. Number of contacts handled is a proxy for cost. More contacts means more efficiency, lower cost per contact. And FCR, make sure that they don't cherry pick and just go after the easy things. So measuring CSAT, measuring contacts handled, measuring FCR is a pretty simple scorecard, but it kind of covers your bases in terms of making sure that agents are held accountable for quality and productivity. Finally, the most important mega trend right now has to do with AI and the implementation of AI in this industry. And for all the hype, I mean, if you just go to any of the big outsourcers' websites, whether it's Genpact or Wipro or TCS or HCL or DXC or IBM or Capgemini, go to their website and all over the landing pages, AI this, AI that, AI this, AI that. It's almost comical. And it reminds me of what was going on in IT service and support 25 years ago. The landing pages of all the outsourcers was ITIL this, ITIL that, ITIL meaning information technology infrastructure library. They now just call it ITIL. But it's, AI has been kind of a buzzword until recently. And now we are seeing significant traction with AI due to social acceptance. There's a general consensus that this is happening whether we like it or not. And so socially it's become acceptable to not just accept, but embrace AI. Data science, or so-called big data, and massive computing power, which is very cheap, make it possible to turn large language models into voice and chat bots, and to provide quality interactions to customers without the interaction of an agent. And overall, cost and quality pressures are driving this adoption as well. Every organization is always under cost pressure. Every organization is always under quality pressure. And this inflection point is like the perfect storm of social acceptance of AI, massive computing power that's very low cost, big data, and our understanding now of taking quadrillions or septillions of data points and turning those into insights that drive FCR, drive customer experience, drive costs down, and so on. And then the ubiquitous cost and quality pressures that every organization experiences. This is driving a revolution. And it's what we call a zero touch or agentless resolution. So when we think about an AI maturity spectrum, on the left is the least complex manifestation of AI. On the far right is the most complex manifestation of AI, which is where you get to zero touch or agentless resolution. So on the far left, we have self-help, self-service, where customers go to a portal and they type in a query and they get a solution to their issue. Some might argue that that's not really AI. They might say that, there's no machine learning going on there, but it sort of mimics human behavior. So I'm kind of giving this the benefit of the doubt and saying, okay, that's a really low evolutionary form of AI. And then we have things like password resets. Okay, those are ubiquitous in every industry, and those can be automated away. Again, people might argue that's not really AI, but it does mimic human behavior. Then you have voice and chat bots, and these are proven technologies. This is not new stuff. They've been around now for 10 years. And there are excellent voice and chat bots there. And if you're not taking advantage of those channels, I would strongly encourage you to start exploring those. And they're very low risk, low cost, low risk. It's kind of a no-brainer to go after that. Then in some cases, you have automated processes, automated workflow, for example, automated categorization of customer inquiries. In the IT service and support space, this would include automated ITIL, automated problem incident and knowledge management, but the automation of processes in the contact center environment, the categorization of the contacts, the automatic routing of contacts, ensuring that the right contacts get to the right person at the right time at the right place. So kind of a skills-based routing without having to use skills-based routing. Then you've got anomaly detection. Why are so many customers calling us? Well, there's a billing error, or there's an outage, or there's a defect in a product. So detecting these anomalies, which are driving volumes. And then you've got alerts that can alert an organization to something that might be going on. If you suddenly get a spike in calls related to, in a particular geographic region, for example, for a gas and electric utility, you get a spike in calls related to gas pressure being low, or a power outage or something like that. These auto alerts can mobilize the resources that are necessary to rectify whatever the underlying cause is of the reason that the customers are calling. And then on the machine learning side, which is far right, what you have is preemptive correction and resolution, meaning that the AI can figure out why customers are calling, recognize when there are spikes, or recognize anomalies and correct them, or alternatively send an alert to key personnel within an organization that can rectify, that can correct that issue before it starts generating a lot of phone calls or a lot of chats or a lot of chatbot and voice bot interactions. So left to right, least complex to more complex. This is already happening, but if you haven't embraced voice and chatbots, I would encourage you to take a strong look at that, because they're fairly mature now. They're relatively low cost. You can turn, a $5 or a $10 or $20 or $30 voice or chat transaction into a $2 voice bot or chatbot transaction, or a $1 voice bot or chatbot transaction. And so the AI maturity spectrum, we're pretty far down the path now, moving to the right. However, I would say that the machine learning technologies are not yet what I would call prime time. Some of the vendors would argue otherwise, but I haven't seen any real credible demonstrations yet of machine learning tools in the contact center environment that are learning on their own and replacing humans over time. Voice and chatbots are replacing humans, due to the cost pressures. But in terms of machine learning tools that are making themselves smarter over time, I don't think we're quite there yet. So with that, I'm going to take questions in a couple of minutes. But before I do that, I've got the second poll of the day, the final poll of the day. If you're interested in scheduling a consultation with MetricNet, this is a free call. We can talk about anything you want to. We can talk about today's webcast. We can talk about specific issues you have with your contact center or your service desk. I'll talk about whatever you want to, and there's no obligation. So schedule a half hour with us, and we'll have, at the very least, we'll have an interesting conversation. I'm quite sure of that. So if you would weigh in on this, we can call you back today, or we can call you back next week, depending upon what your availability is. So please take advantage of this service, this free service, if you'd like to. On our website, you'll find a lot of resources. Some of the resources are free, some of them you have to pay for, but we do have downloadable benchmarks. Our lowest cost downloadable benchmark contains 6 KPIs. It's priced at $399. Our most advanced downloadable benchmark is priced at $2,999. It's called the Pro Contact Center Benchmark. We also have these for service desk and desktop support. We also have headcount calculators, balance scorecard templates, and performance target templates that you can download from our website. So I want to encourage you to go to our website, click this button, MetricNet.com shop, and take a look at those resources we have available. And if you like what you've heard today, I'd ask you to sign up for our future webcasts next month. In our first webcast of 2025, I'm going to be speaking on the ROI of IT service and support. We do a lot of work in that area for our clients. We also have a free contact center training course. So if you go to our website, you click this link inside the PDF presentation of today's slides. It's a free metrics course that gives you the industry best practices for contact center professionals. And this is, I, for many years, taught the same course for ICMI. This course is completely different. I wrote it myself, and we give it away because we want contact center professionals to self-actualize in their careers and to achieve as much success as they possibly can. And this is one way of us leveraging our resources to help you get as good as you possibly can. So there's no charge for this, and I would encourage you to take a look at that course if you have time to do so. Once again, you can download our presentation today by clicking on the attachments button. And when you exit the webcast, let us know what you think. Let us know how you think we can do better going forward, and we'll incorporate that feedback into future webcasts. Let's take a look now at the questions. Okay, first question here. What are the best ways to increase live chat adoption? There's a lot of ways that you can do that, Robert. Thanks for the question. One way, if you're trying to deflect away from live voice and into live chat, you can put wait time messages on your voice channel and say, your expected wait time is 10 minutes. Did you know that you can chat, immediately with a chat agent? Go to this URL and you can chat there. So it's a question of creating awareness with customers, letting them know that they have an alternative to the voice channel or the self-help channel. And wait time messages are one way to do that. Also, when they go to a self-help, self-service channel, you can always say, put a button there that says click to chat. And I assume you are talking about live chat. So just creating awareness. Whenever a customer comes to your website, click here to chat with a live agent. Those pop-ups are quite common now when somebody's perusing a consumer website like yours. They can click to chat, and they can also get these wait time messages in the voice channel, which encourages them to click to chat. Okay, next question is from Kelly. What are the top use cases for IVR-capable self-service options for the IT service desk? The number one use case is just password reset. And in the IVR, it's within a service desk. That's about the only thing you can do in an IVR is reset a password. You're not going to be resolving even simple stuff like Microsoft Office or Windows or Outlook, let alone more complex things like ERP and complex infrastructure and business applications. You're not going to be doing that stuff in an IVR, but you can get passwords reset inside that IVR for a service desk. Nevertheless, there are self-help, self-service use cases where you can get your issues resolved around Windows and Office and Outlook and things like that, and in some cases even more complex applications and infrastructure. But specifically on the IVR, about the only thing you're going to be able to do there for a service desk is reset a password. Also from Kelly, does cost per contact only include the techs taking calls and working tickets? No, it's a fully loaded cost. It's your techs, it's your supervisors and team leads, it's your workforce schedulers, it's your QA, QC people, it's your trainers, and it's also their office space, it's the cost of your technology, it's your travel, your training, your office supplies. If you go to the HDI conference, for example, where I was 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, I presented on AI and how AI is automating idle at the conference in, I think it was either Service Management World or Service World Live in Orlando. So I presented on that recently. That's what might constitute travel expenses, but it's a fully loaded cost is my point. Nevertheless, your agents or your techs represent about 50 or 52% of the total cost. If you want a real rough, fully loaded, if you want to get a rough calculation of your fully loaded cost for either a contact center contact or a service desk ticket, just take your agent cost and double it. That gets you pretty close to your fully loaded cost. So you do your agent headcount, multiply it by their compensation, their base compensation, and that's going to give you a rough approximation of what your total fully loaded cost is. And again, that includes not just your personnel costs, but also their benefits, and then all the overhead, which would include your SaaS tools, your software licenses, your office space, your travel training, and so on and so forth. Next question. What factors go into cost calculation? I just answered that question. How do you establish the right performance goals for individual agents in the contact center? What you want to be doing is looking at all the agents compared to each other. And you want to look at your top performing agents. And not everybody can be as good as the top performing agent, but they can get to the top quartile. So what you want to be doing is looking for the 3 metrics that I spoke about in the example of the agent scorecard. You look at customer satisfaction, first contact resolution rate, and number of contacts handled per month. You look at the top quartile for your whole agent population, and you establish a top quartile target for everyone that works in that contact center. So that's how you would establish those agent performance targets. Next question, what would I consider to be a good or great score on the balanced scorecard? Normally 50 to 55% is the average. So if you're above that, you're above average. Top quartile is around 65% typically. So I would consider 65+% to be a good score, and I would consider 75+% to be a great score on the balanced scorecard. Next question, what if we don't have all the metrics you have shown in the scorecard? Well, choose the best metrics you have. There should be a cost metric, either cost per contact or cost per minute of handle time. A proxy for that would be number of contacts per agent per month. So if you don't have cost metrics, and they're pretty easy to calculate, cost metrics aren't that hard. I've just given you one idea for how you can estimate the fully loaded cost per ticket, which is just your agent cost, salaries and benefits multiplied by 2. That gets you a rough proxy for your average cost per contact. So if you don't have the cost metric, you can probably calculate it pretty easy, but you can use productivity as a proxy, which would be number of contacts per agent per month. If you don't have FCR, there's not a real good proxy for FCR. If you don't track it, that's not good. You should be tracking it. One way to track it is just to embed the question in your CSAT survey. You ask the customer if they got resolution on first contact. And if they say yes, well, that's FCR. If they say no, it's not FCR. And then the third one would be customer satisfaction. You should be tracking that. If you're not, you should. And tracking that tracking that is fairly important because CSAT or Net Promoter Score are not so much NPS. I don't like that as a metric because it's not very intuitive, even though many contact centers do track it. CSAT's a better metric because it's very intuitive to most people and they understand it. So you should be tracking that if you're not tracking that. And there's a variety of ways you can measure CSAT. You can do email surveys, you can do flash, push the button on your phone surveys after a voice contact, or you can, right after a live chat, you can ask the customer to take a quick survey. You can also do interviews. You randomly call customers and you do an interview CSAT survey, but those are very costly and time consuming. So there's a variety of things you can do to capture the CSAT metric, but if you're not looking at it, you should be looking at it. How long does a benchmark, next question, how long does a benchmark take, and do you come on site or need access to our systems? Okay, we don't go on site. We do all our work remotely. We don't need access to your systems. A benchmark requires you to fill out an Excel form, tell us your headcount, tell us your spending, tell us your performance metrics, and we can benchmark you very effectively without going on site. Some of our clients like us coming on site. I just got back from Eastern Europe, where I was on site for a few days with a client that wanted us there to not just deliver the results of their benchmark, but tell them, what's the path forward in terms of adopting best practices and achieving world-class performance. So generally they can be done remotely. However, we will travel to a customer site if they want us to. How long does it take? Well, nominally it's about 4 weeks. That assumes 2 weeks of data collection followed by 2 weeks of MetricNet processing your benchmark. Now, the data collection doesn't take you a full 2 weeks. It only takes about 10 to 15 hours. But nonetheless, our clients, generally, they get their data collection forms back to us in about 2 weeks. However, This is not a hard and fast rule. We have clients that get their data to us in a day. And if they're, anxious to get their results, we can turn that benchmark around usually in a couple of days. So we've seen benchmarks done in as few as 2 or 3 days. We've seen a benchmark take a year, for clients that are in no hurry to get their data to us. So it varies, but a good rule of thumb is roughly 4 weeks, which would include 2 weeks of data collection on your end, and then 2 weeks of benchmark processing on our end. But once again, it's not 2 full weeks of data collection. It's only 10 to 15 hours of work to get the data on average. But the cycle time for most of our clients is that they get their data back to us in about 2 weeks. So let me see if there are any other questions here. Let me see. I think that was all of our questions. Yeah, that was all of our questions. So just want to say thank you for joining us today. I know your time's valuable, and the fact that you were able to spend this time with me today to talk about what the benchmarks for the contact center industry in 2024 looked like. I appreciate that. It means a lot to me. So thank you for joining us for our discussion on the 2024 Contact Center Benchmarking Roundup. I do hope that you found this to be informative and insightful. So this concludes our webcast. I hope to see you next month on our first webcast of 2025. In the meantime, I wish you all a great holiday season, and I wish all the best for you and your families, and hope to see you on our webcast next year. Thanks again.